Dave Filoni's rumored Heir to the Empire movie is heating up with a few new details, but it still faces a big challenge. And what is this theory about Return of the Jedi's true meaning? Welcome to Star Wars Uplink, your place for everything Star Wars gaming, the TV shows, and the movies. Let's jump in.
Just you reconsider playing that message for him.
Dave Filoni's new Heir to the Empire movie, at least that's what it's rumored to be called, had some mention. He's apparently got the intro written. He says, I will say I have an opening I really like quite a bit. I'm very excited about it for that picture. I'm excited about the potential of just doing it. I am also excited about the potential that this movie holds.
Same.
But there are definitely some things that need to be thought about for this project. One, like we've talked about before, Star Wars hasn't had a movie in a while. By the time this movie comes out, there will have been some Star Wars that has been released. We've got the Mandalorian movie that's coming out. That'll be the first one in 2026, May of 2026. Then later on in that year, if it all holds together, we're probably going to get either the Dawn of the Jedi movie or the Rey Skywalker movie. That would be my guess around that.
Yeah.
And then up in the air in terms of what we're going to get next, but more than likely it's going to be Dave Filoni's movie. Mm-hmm. By that time, he'll have some good experience with working on a big movie production with Jon Favreau and the Mandalorian movie, so that'll be good for him. And then also just as his new role in Lucasfilm as like the chief creative officer or whatever, he is going to be in much more discussions at multiple levels across various projects in terms of the future of where they want Star Wars to go. So I think that it'll be really good for his growth as a writer and a director for live action. He's really good with animated, as we've talked about in the past. Struggled a little bit in terms of the condensed story that we saw in Ahsoka.
Yeah.
But the biggest concern that I think is going to be there for Dave Filoni's Star Wars movie is the fact that Star Wars Heir to the Empire, they need to do a good job of weaving in things from the TV shows like Ahsoka and The Mandalorian, which I think are going to be key pieces to building up Thrawn's story. Mm-hmm. But they need to make sure that you don't have to watch it. They need to make sure that the villain of Thrawn or whatever is actually a tangible villain within that unit. Rather than wanting it to be, oh, well, if you watched Ahsoka seasons 1 and 2 and Mandalorian, then you would just know that he's a villain. Mm-hmm. No, you need to make sure that it's clear within the material itself. And that is, I think, going to be a big struggle.
Yeah, we've talked about this before on just different on the different ones, especially with around Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett even. Yes. And that wasn't even that wasn't a movie. It was another TV show where it was just a more popular TV show versus a lesser known one that people weren't following as closely, and it still, they didn't make it contained in and of itself. So yeah, definitely something that we haven't seen done well recently in Star Wars, which is the whole like going from one show to another or one show to a movie or whatever. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen that flow. Especially with these things that they anticipate and we know will get more watches and more people interested in, which is the movies. The movies get the most watched and most people. So, It's
the top of the funnel of Star Wars, and it's also the way that Star Wars makes money is the movies. And like you said, with Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, a key part of the Mandalorian's journey wasn't in The Mandalorian. It was in a Book of Boba Fett. It was in a couple episodes of the Book of Boba Fett, and that was a spinoff of The Mandalorian. And clearly, people that like The Mandalorian only like The Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. Many people did not watch the Book of Boba Fett, but watched season 3 of The Mandalorian.
Right. It was very confusing. It was a very confusing time.
Yes.
Why they decided to do that, I don't know. I'm assuming it was some behind the scenes.
Probably Pedro Pascal's schedule.
Yeah. Unfortunate. But with something as big as Heir to the Empire and what they're making of Ahsoka and all this, like I would think, well, and especially if it ties in with Mandalorian as well, like,
yeah,
we've got.
I think they kind of have to take some of the stuff with Ahsoka and Thrawn. I think they need to take that and put it into the Mandalorian Grogu movie. Mm-hmm. I think that's gonna be the first Avengers movie if we're gonna put it in MCU terms, because ultimately Heir to the Empire is going to be like the Infinity War or Endgame of the Mandoverse. Mm-hmm. It's going to tie all of the stories that they've told so far together to fight the foe that is Thrawn. Yeah. And I think that is going to be the overarching thing, and it's going to start with like the Mandalorian Grogu movie.
I think it's going to be very difficult for them for them to have a contained movie that doesn't need the other shows.
Yes.
Especially because of just how ingrained they've already made Thrawn into these different shows.
Yes.
So I think it's going to be a very difficult task to ask of them to be like, hey, no, just make this movie a good movie. Mm-hmm.
But also in the background have Thrawn like start affecting things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the real struggle here.
Yeah.
I'm going to be interested to see how they pull it off. There are good ways and there are bad ways to do this. We've seen a lot of various good and bad ways that they've portrayed story in Star Wars, and I think they've learned a lot throughout the years around The Mandalorian and Grogu and the spinoffs. I think Ahsoka was a good turning point to where Dave Filoni, I would hope, learned a lot from that experience, both as a director and also as a writer for that medium. It lacked a lot of the meat that show needed. It didn't have many core messages. It didn't have many things that were actually accomplished throughout the show. It was just like, okay, we're starting here, and then we're going to end kind of as a flipped version of where we started. And things happened, but things didn't actually happen. Now we need to see things are moving forward, things need to happen, things need to change.
Characters need to grow.
Yes, they need to grow. And also I think there was good feedback around Thrawn as a character, of how a lot of Thrawn's character in the Ahsoka show was just a fraction of kind of what he could be and what he should be if you look at the books and the material from the books. And I think...
and Rebels.
Yeah, and Rebels even. Yeah, exactly. And I think Ahsoka struggled with the fact that they had 4 seasons of Rebels before this show.
Yes.
And I heard from people that had never seen Rebels that enjoyed it. I also heard from people that had never seen Rebels and were lost.
Yes.
They didn't feel like they had any context on why they should actually care about the characters. So I've heard from multiple people, both sides of the story, around, I was totally lost. I didn't really care about these characters. Or like, no, I thought they were interesting, but I was a little confused.
Yeah. I think that's going to be Dave Filoni's biggest struggle, is not seeing the rest of his work that he's done, not having, like, to try and forget
he's the
that
expert
whole background
on what he's done.
Exactly.
He did it.
Yeah, and these are his characters. These are his babies, other than Thrawn.
Yes, other than Thrawn.
But even him, like, he did play a lot with him in Rebels and whatnot.
The Thrawn in Rebels is different from the Thrawn in the books.
For sure.
Slightly. There definitely some similarities.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's heavily pulling from all that information, but he needs to step away from everyone that knows what I did, because I know what I did, and he needs to like separate these projects and just focus in on the project that he's working on there and then, to make it a good story, a full-fleshed thing, and not relying on everything else that he's done.
And that's the real struggle. There needs to be this balance of, we've done this in the past, we've told these stories in the past, but also we need to move forward. And I think the real struggle is, as a writer, you know where the story is going to go, so you see the full picture.
Right.
But as a viewer watches it, they're only seeing a sliver, and they're only seeing that specific piece of the picture. They aren't seeing the canvas or the thing you're building on top of.
Right.
They are only seeing that specific 4-inch square that you're currently painting.
If this was a puzzle every audience member only gets that one piece of puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
whereas someone like Dave Filoni has the original picture.
Yeah, he's got the box.
He's got the box. He knows what the end goal is. He knows what it all is going to look like in the end. But we only get the puzzle piece. So he needs to be making these puzzle pieces look really, really good. Every single one. Then you put them together and it's like, oh my gosh, it's just getting better and better, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's going to be the real struggle for these movies and the crossover from movie to TV show. I think it's going to be really fascinating to see The Mandalorian go from TV show to just movie. There have been conflicting rumors around there isn't going to be a season 4. There is going to be a season 4. I've heard more recently that there probably isn't going to be a season 4, and that Bob Iger's focus for Disney and subsequently Star Wars is to have more of these tentpole figures, the things that have been successes, be the headline pieces of the movies.
Yeah.
And then have like the smaller stuff, have things like The Mandalorian fill in the gaps, like have the TV shows build the characters that they can ultimately like
make it to movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
I think that's a good idea. I do wonder, like, with Acolyte's madness going on, with like the review bombing and the difference of the show like not connecting to really anything. I do wonder like how that's going to affect and change the plans.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see another $180 million TV show.
No.
I think the Andor season 2 is probably going to be the last one that they do to that scale.
Yeah. It's kind of a shame.
It's kind of a shame, but I also think it's a victory because a lot of what Star Wars was in the beginning was like, let's pinch pennies, let's try to make something with the smallest budget as possible.
I gotcha.
And that fuels innovation, that fuels some really interesting decisions that were made. You can make really pretty things. If you look at Godzilla Minus Zero, like that was a $15 million project. And it made over like $150 million or something insane. Like it made tons of money.
Wow.
And I would hope that they would make this decision of like, we're going to put TV show money to the TV shows,
right,
and we're going to have the movies be over here. And we're going to experiment and flesh out the galaxy behind the scenes around the TV shows while we have the big picture, explosive, game-changing moments on the big screen.
Yeah, that makes more sense. It's hard to think that we're going to get another Mandalorian moment, you know, like to think of, it seems that the goal is to make these new characters or whatever and like have these like niche moments in the TV shows and then they can just build off of that and then go to movies.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's really going to happen. I feel like Mandalorian was kind of a fluke. Like it was kind of just a random thing that just took the world by storm sort of thing. It's like, I don't know that we were ever going to get something like that again. But good concept, I guess.
I think Star Wars works the best when it's not intending to make a hit or success. Like it's not. Star Wars works the best when it's not aware of the impact that it's going to create. I feel like Star Wars fails when they are like, this is going to be the big thing.
Yeah.
Look at Mandalorian season 3. Look at Book of Boba Fett. Look at Obi Wan Kenobi, the show.
Yeah.
I think all of those things were like, this is a surefire success. Look at these things. We're doing this. But none of them reached the level of Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2. But particularly season 1. That was just a pop culture moment.
Yeah.
That I don't think, like you said, I wonder if we're ever going to see again, especially with how volatile the fandom is becoming.
For sure.
Yes.
Well, and with more of a switch to TV shows than to movies.
Just like being focused on TV shows or being focused on TV shows like originally with Disney Plus and Mandalorian to now just be movies.
Yep. It's going to be a really interesting shift, and I'll be very curious to see just how we all react to that as consumers of Star Wars.
Yes.
And just how they pull it off. Like, is this going to be really effective? Is this going to be... Are they going to make well fleshed out stories, or are they just going to heavily rely on these characters that they've built up for us and in the TV shows, but not actually give us a good story around it?
I think it's a good question. We shall see. Another thing, going back to kind of the history of Star Wars, there's this theory that's been going around, just saw, and I think it's been going around for a little bit, but it's around the true meaning of Return of the Jedi. For many years, it's been this belief that Luke Skywalker is actually the Jedi mentioned in Return of the Jedi. And around all the Star Wars titles, we've always had rumors and theories around the meaning behind the names. The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker. Who is the Last Jedi? Who is the Skywalker that is rising?
Right.
These are things that have always been kind of like there in the background with the discussion pieces around the culture and community of Star Wars. This, though, takes the idea of the Jedi in Return of the Jedi and flips it a little bit on its head. It poses the question, what if the Jedi, the returning Jedi, is actually in regards to Darth Vader's redemption?
Ooh, okay.
And I actually like this theory a lot because of this focus on, like, yes, the Jedi are returning in terms of Luke Skywalker becoming the Jedi Knight that he wanted to become, and save the galaxy and all that stuff. But Darth Vader going from the Sith and then returning to his form as a Jedi, I think is also a good read on this.
Especially because even though the Force Ghost thing is kind of a little bit of a touchy subject, but he still comes back as the Jedi version of himself. He's in the Jedi
robes.
Exactly.
Whether you're watching the pre-George Lucas touching things up or the post-George Lucas touching things up, either way, no matter which actor's there, they are returning
as their Jedi self.
Yes.
That's really interesting. There's been so much, like, controversy and confusion around just the names of all of the Star Wars movies. It's really funny. But that actually makes more sense. Because Luke isn't really returning to anything.
Yeah.
He's literally just growing into the Jedi that he is becoming. So that's not necessarily a return. So yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Now, I do think the proper read is still Luke Skywalker because he is, as we see in Legends, his goal is to build a school for the Jedi. He wants to build a Jedi Academy and train the next generation of Jedi. So in that regard, the Jedi community type, religious beliefs, their sect, whatever you want to call it, they are returning eventually. But in regards to the movie, I think a really good read is no. Anakin is returning to his role as a Jedi. He is the Jedi that is returning. And I think it's just fascinating to see, like, there have been big discussions around, like, how can you actually grow and be forgiven and be redeemed as someone who has committed heinous acts? And I think they've never actually, like, really closed the book on that. Both examples that we have, Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, and Kylo Ren, those two both become redeemed, but they die, so they don't actually face the repercussions of their actions. They don't go to court, they don't go on trial, they don't do anything. They have, like, the benefit of just dying. Yeah. So they don't actually ever face the consequences of their actions.
I mean, in a way that is the consequence of their actions, but
not
it's the easiest way out.
It's the easiest way out. It is like, oh yeah, I'm good now, guys. It's like you used a laser to destroy 5 planets,
right?
All with tons of people on it.
Yeah.
Now you're like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna save Rey, and then all sins are forgiven.
Yeah, I'm gonna help you destroy the big bad, and now I die. Bye.
Yes.
So that's good.
So I think there's still some things that they could work on going into the future of, like, what does it look like for these actions to be taken, and then what are the repercussions on those actions? Because I think that would be fascinating. I think it'd be really difficult to pull off
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But it would be so cool to see. What if Kylo Ren survived and had to face the actions? What does that look like for Rey to justify her trust in him to keep on going forward?
Yeah. Ooh. As with all movie titles, though, or just titles in general, they can be totally manipulated, and we can. It could be both.
We could say the Rise of Skywalker because it's just a name, could be Finn or like it could be literally anybody.
Maybe Skywalker is just now a term for like
heroes.
Yeah, heroes in this great family sort of thing that they're all just emanating or something. It's not a big deal, but it's really fun to think about. And
well, when the Phantom Menace was announced, everyone was theorizing around who is the Phantom in the Phantom Menace. What is this ghost threat that is going to be there?
Yeah.
And I think it's always fun.
Yeah.
It kind of sucks that they're going to just more commercially viable names.
Yeah.
Mandalorian Grogu, the movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. So it's all about the characters and nothing about like behind the scenes stuff or like Phantom Menace. Like, what does that even mean?
Star Wars.
You know?
Mandalorian Grogu. Okay. That's straightforward, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. No thoughts deeper than that. Just it is what it is. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Very good.
There's a lot of these things I do think is going to be fascinating. I think as much as we like joke around the Mandalorian Grogu movie, I think it's a super unoriginal name, and I don't think it's very creative, but it's what Star Wars needs right now. They need something that they can put on a sign and say, oh, did you see the Mandalorian movie? That's what people are going to ask. No matter what they call it, it's going to be called the Mandalorian movie.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I mean,
they can't call it Baby Yoda.
No, not when they officially named Grogu.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, especially just the culture around Mandalorian, especially. Just don't even bother. Just go with what the people are going to say.
Exactly.
Anyway, it makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's ultimately what they need to do is to do this for the characters and for the movies, for the business. But I do hope that in the future we get more things like Revenge of the Jedi, Return of the Jedi, or The Empire Strikes Back, or A New Hope, or The Phantom Menace, or The Last Jedi. Like,
I would imagine we'd see something, especially with like the Rey movie coming out.
More than likely, yeah, because they can't call it like. I mean, they could call it Star Wars Rey Skywalker, but
but it doesn't even seem like it's about her.
Yeah.
So
it does seem like it's more about her than it was originally when she was just an old lady that was like.
Just off in the distance helping some students apparently or some such something. Yeah. So even still, we don't have the connection that we do with the Mandalorian that we do with Rey.
Yeah,
I would say it's pretty close, but it's not
anywhere near Grogu.
No, not anywhere near them. So yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, I do. I do think it makes sense. But let us know your thoughts around this old theory around Return of the Jedi's true meaning, and what do you think about Dave Filoni's Heir to the Empire movie? Would love to hear your thoughts around this topic. What would you like to see in the future? Let us know in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, or contact at uplinkpodcast.com if you're listening to this wherever you find podcasts. As always, thank you for listening. May the Force be with you.